This is a Calexandra recording. Hitchups by the Antic Repartee, or AvannaK. Chapter 2. Axed. Hiccup leaned his back against Toothless, curling into the body heat and allowing the sounds of his surroundings to soothe his uneasy mind. Crickets, owl hoots, and the occasional wolf howl played a vibrato to the background noise of highland winds and popping kindle. The moderate fire he constructed flickered sharply against the blue-black setting, further augmenting the hypnotic effect. After a lengthy aerial trek, nearly a full-day fly to the south of Berwick, Hiccup found himself stretched out under the stars on an uncharted island. He knew he would not have to worry about being immediately followed. It could be days for a ship to reach their point, what with the numerous low-hanging crags and rock stacks acting as obstacles. And that was if the hooligans knew where to look in the first place. Flying was a hard mode of travel to track. Fed, warm, and waiting only for the pull of sleep to take him in, Hiccup had nothing to occupy his mind other than reflection. He had been accepted as a Viking among his tribe, everything he had worked for since he first recognized an anomaly with himself, only to have it taken prematurely. All of it. The gratification, the prestige, the option of actually becoming chief. Gone. Granted, it was built on falsehoods and deceptions, but at least people listened to him. At least people looked at him and saw potential. That was all he needed to get his feet off the ground, anyway. Soon people would take his invention seriously. They would see him at face value and accept what he was, despite not being brawny and boorish, and they would listen to his alternatives to fighting. Or not. In all honesty, it was too soon to tell how far his newfound fame would have gotten him. None of it mattered at this point anyway. He left. He made his choice. There was no point in reminiscing on what could have been. Then, without prompting, Hiccup thought of his father, of the pride he heard in his voice. The boy could not remember a time when he'd heard that tone, a tone he'd waited to be directed at him for years and years. He felt as though he was given a taste of utopia before having it cruelly snatched away from him. He was taunted with the phantasm of what his relationship should have been with his father, had he only been born right. Emotion welled, not just at his own loss, but also at the subjugation and scrutiny his father would endure because of him. I hope my dad's okay. Toothless lifted his head, and the great reptile's eyes flashed in the bright moonlight. Through forces unknown, Hiccup could completely understand the dragon's mindset. He's not that bad. He's really a good guy. He's just the chief, you know? He's so Viking that he couldn't possibly understand someone who's... Hiccup paused to look down at himself. Not so Viking. Which is why it's good that only Vikings live this far north. And for his own son to be, well, like me, must have been hard. I know he probably had a rough time facing other tribes and seeing their perfect heirs. Bitterness had crept into his voice before he could stop it, and he only just recognized it. Sorry, Hiccup muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. The part that hurt most, more than leaving his father childless, more than smothering that far but bright glint of the possible future in Berk, was the cold, unarguable truth that everyone's lives would be better now that he was out of them. His father could focus on running the village, and Snotlout was the obvious next heir, though there was a good chance he would have taken over anyway. Hiccup wouldn't be around to aggravate Astrid, or for the twins to pull pranks on, and there were tons of candidates who would be a better apprentice in the smithy than he was. I made the right choice, he whispered to himself, and he found confidence in making the announcement. Toothless chuffed against his hair, morally backing him. Hiccup smiled and brushed several strands of dislodged hair from his eyes. So, where do you want to go? He asked. The dragon whirred, and directed his triangular head southeast in accordance to the stars. That way, huh? Hiccup pointed in the same direction with his arm for confirmation. Yeah, that's heading towards Drutland. Hey, if we keep heading in that direction, we should eventually reach Miklagard. I hear it's the largest city ever built. They have this really big wall to keep Vikings from sailing there, but that won't be a problem for us, will it, buddy? Toothless crooned his agreement, almost absent-mindedly, and motioned towards the axe that Hiccup decided to drag along seconds before their departure. The weapon lay amongst Hiccup's meager belongings, its blade gleaming in the quivering firelight, majestic and mocking. The dragon did not like that axe for many reasons, the first of which being that it belonged to the awful girl who hurt his sweet boy, because who in their right mind would try to hurt Hiccup? It would be like kicking dragon's eggs. The second being that it was one more sharp object just waiting for a chance mishap with Hiccup. Not that Hiccup was the walking disaster his people seemed to believe him as. Toothless had seen Hiccup move and run and play with grace only seen in dragons. Lastly, it implied that he was not enough protection for Hiccup, which he was. Hiccup, for his part, felt a sudden and inadvertent need to defend himself from the dragon's stare. "Hey, don't judge me. I couldn't just leave it there." "You could have." "It would be a waste of a perfectly good blade destroyed by the elements." "She would have returned for it." "Okay, maybe I wanted to piss her off a little." Toothless cocked his head to the side. "It's just..." Hiccup ran his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "It's just that I had this whole escape plan sort of formulated. You see, I left a note for my dad, basically playing up my inability to fit in. I sort of hinted that I had been outsmarting dragons rather than defeating them, and I mentioned how I simply could not kill a dragon, which also played into my not fitting in, and that I'm choosing the life of an outcast." He sighed, breaking off from his babbling. "Look, I tried to make it look like a self-exile, whereas Astrid finding out my true reasons for leaving and then tattling. Oh, come on, you know she did. You saw her. Will make me look like a traitor. Which I am, I guess. I just wanted my dad to feel more disappointment than betrayal about this." The Night Fury lowered his head to the ground and moaned with sympathy for his human. Eyes trained on the fire, Hiccup inattentively reached over and scratched the scales just over Toothless's left eye. "Maybe it's unfair for me to pin all of my anger on Astrid, but she didn't even give me a chance to explain. No curiosity or sense of judgment told her to hear me out. She was just a mindless slave to the Viking code. If she had just waited a few moments, listened for a bit, she would have seen, she could have realized. And now everything is so messed up." Toothless realized that Hiccup was getting upset again when he stopped scratching to muss his hair up some more. Deciding to take the situation into his own claws, Toothless shifted his weight to curl his heavy tail across Hiccup's lap, further encasing the human in warmth. Troubled as he was, Hiccup couldn't help but smile. "I guess I should sleep on this, shouldn't I, bud?" Toothless gurgled shortly. "And then we'll head out first thing tomorrow." "I don't know what I'd do without you," Hiccup yawned, just then realizing how his emotional day physically drained him. "You keep me sane." Watching as the thin, human eyelids slipped closed, Toothless accepted this as Hiccup's bid good night. The dragon remained awake for much longer than his human, his ears twitching at every sound in protectiveness bordering on paranoia, all while sending the inert axe, whom he'd named Astrid II, looks of the deepest loathing.